Welcome to the February meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. Want to start by talking about, we've been looking for several months now, really building on what we've done over many years at issues related to drainage in the village and Lake Agawam. Put in front, have at this meeting a list of the items which is a compilation of all the studies that were done about the various measures that could be taken to clean up Lake Agawam. Some of them have happened. Some of them have partially happened. Others have not happened. One of the issues we know with all the lakes in the village is the nitrogen load. Several years ago, the village had a study done by H2M about the possibility of a sewer system to address that issue relating to the village center. That did not go ahead. We all decided we needed more study. The first part of that study was whether or not it was having an impact on the lake, which the answer was yes, it does. And then the second part, and I think, so let's open up for, because we just started having a conversation before the formal meeting, is what is the most economic and efficient way to address it? I think one of the things we're seeing very starkly this year is that without diversifying uses in the village center, this is a very hard business model to sustain. Because if you're trying to make money only during the daytime hours in the winter, it's going to be really hard to sustain. And if you look at places like Sag Harbor, where they do have a sewer, and in fact there are a lot of more diverse uses, you can really see the difference in terms of the vitality of the village throughout the year. So we want to open up for comment, thought, what we think about where we are. Mr. Schiffer.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was involved in the study by H2M for a centralized wastewater system, and I think the study was a very good study, and the need for such a sewer system in our village is unquestionable, but one of the first reasons for it is health. It's public health. It's the fact that we have a very high water table in the central village business district, and they don't really perk properly. And it's really we need to do it. We need to do it. If it's only for a health reason, we do it. And then also it will allow to have, as you say, diversified use. So in the development of a sewer system, one of the first elements that needs to be decided is where do you put the plant. There has to be a centralized plant. Whatever technology is used, whether it's membrane technology, MBR technology, all kinds of new technologies that came up that are, where you actually treat the water to maybe potable water standards. You need to have a little plant for it. When we initially studied the sewering of the village business district, one possibility was to use the hospital plant, which is downhill, would be gravity fed. So that's a very good site. We then also found a site behind the police station, which we thought would be also a very good site. But now that's what the ambulance is being done in the front. There would be the possibility to do it in the back. And another site that would be very appropriate for it would be the site. There is a property next to the post office.
Right.
And the one next to the post office is also extremely suitable in terms of for a gravity feed and for in terms of location. And so I think that's the first step would be for us to decide where to put it, possibly acquire that site through CPF funds or whatever funds we need to. And then the second phase would then to get engineering firms to come up with various designs on how we would collect it and what treatment system we would use and so on and so forth.
Mark, do you want to talk about the difference between, so, we've talked here about the county is now allowing new technologies and how that relates to what we would look at or not,
Well,
as the case may be?
there is, yes, there is technology for like for example, we use right now those nitrogen reduction systems that we use for houses. But right now in the regulations, there is, in Suffolk County, one of the issues that we have in the village is that there are a lot of very, very small lots. Right? A lot of small lots. Somebody was trying to put, for example, a pizzeria on a lot here in the village, and we couldn't do it because the allowable flow that you are allowed from the Suffolk County Health Department depends on the size of the lot. So because we have so many lots, it's very hard to get any meaningful flow. And one way to go around these regulations is when you have the centralized wastewater system, which they call Exhibit A or Exhibit B of the regulations. At that point, you're no longer limited.
Not restricted.
You're not restricted by the size of your lot. You are now restricted for what type of use you want. If you're going to use, if you have a residential use, or if you have. So that's why the centralized wastewater system would then free us to be able to. It would create also a level field for every commercial owner in the village to be able to use and apply, and we would, through our zoning, we would then control the use.
Right.
But it's so in terms of technology, there is a lot of brand new technologies that we have for wastewater treatment, but you still need that centralized.
I think, we have been discussing this as a commission for quite a while,
Yep.
and we've had studies, and
Right.
I think what's missing is the will. And with the government, with our governing bodies, we have to have the will.
Right. But I
And, it's not going to be, you're going to have people that are for it and people that are not for it, but that's just the way the world is.
Well, I guess two thoughts. One is, are there ways with the new technology to reduce the cost? Because I think there was a lot of sticker shock, right, when the study came out.
But 30 million is the village budget as is, so you're
Right.
going to double that? I mean, it's
Well, no, you bond these
no,
things.
I understand.
Yes, you do bond them.
Right.
You do, you float bonds and stuff,
Right,
and
right.
absolutely.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, there's still cost no matter what.
Right, but it's a big amount of money, whatever it is. Whether it's 20 or 30, it's a lot of money. Right. Right. So that's one issue. The second issue, I think, is, one of the things, again, maybe we can be more innovative this time. So, for example,
How about give people options?
one thought is, in looking at the issues on Lake Agawam, one thing that's very clear is a significant cause of the problems on the lake are actually the houses around the lake.
Pesticides
And many of them, pesticides being one thing, but the other thing is, most of the houses around the lake are fairly old, and many of them have old septics, and unless they're bought and renovated, they're still operating. So one thought is if you extended the sewer district to include Lake Agawam, you get a lot of property tax and a lot of people who could help afford to pay for it. And it would have a big impact on the actual flow into the lake.
Yes.
So that may be one way, again, to deal with the issue of how do you moderate the impact. Because the business district, given all its economic problems, cannot shoulder this burden
Not
itself.
totally.
Well, I think pay $4,000 a month for a store half the size.
Right, exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But I think that also that would allow us to tap into, under the clean water bills and
Right.
under the federal government's
Yeah.
programs.
Right.
for
There's a
clean
lot
water.
of programs out there that are
Right,
just
exactly.
begging.
So if there's,
Just begging, yes.
I think there's an openness among the homeowners along the lake that wasn't there 5-10 years ago. And so, Jesse's done a great job for us of sort of just cataloging all the work that's been done over so many years. And one of the things that came up is that, the two biggest issues in the lake are the village center and the houses around the lake. And so if you could address the houses around the lake, that may be part, I agree with you, then you have a better case that the sewer district really has the potential of really making a significant impact.
But I think with the houses, I think it's vital that we give, we give them options. We say, okay, you can do this private type, you can do a household system, or if we go this route, we can tap into the.
Well, no, but the idea is sort of the opposite. The idea is that given houses that have that property tax in value and given the extent to which they impact the lake, that actually would help pay for the sewer system.
No, I understand.
But when you give them options, if they can just do it themselves, then it doesn't solve the bigger problem. If you can bring them into the fold, it helps to solve the problem.
But it would solve the lake problem, that's all.
Yeah, it would. It would make significant impact.
But it doesn't solve the business problem, doesn't solve the diversity problem, if it's just for the lake.
But
No, it would be for both.
Oh, it would.
No, I wasn't clear.
What you're talking about
What I'm talking about is
is absolutely,
do a
I
sewer
understand
district
it.
that does the village center, North Sea Road, and Lake Agawam.
Right.
And then it would do a number of things it wanted. Lake
And
Agawam,
Main Street.
North Sea Road is the main water flow in.
Yeah.
The village center desperately needs the sewer, both because of the impact it has on the lake, but also for itself, if it's going to survive viably. And then the lake is majorly impacted, to use a bad, not English,
Well, I think we all know this.
by the septic from the houses.
Well, but I think that you probably know better than I do, but from the people we've had in over the last year or so, it seems like it's not just the immediate houses, it's all the houses.
Right.
Going to the entire village going up to the edge of the watershed. So it's a question of how fast that sewage gets to the lake, not when. And yes, if you're right on the lake, it'll take 6 months if you're, and so on and so forth going back.
Right.
So I don't know that we'd have to ask an expert if that significantly changes anything.
But I think that if we do that sewer district, and I think to include those houses is a tremendous idea. But it will also have a tremendous impact in cleaning up the lake and also the value of the property, such that they will now front on a lake that's much cleaner.
Right.
So and the other aspect that we did not look at 3 or 4, 5 years ago when we did that study was the possibility to go into what we call now a P3, a public-private partnership. And one of the issues on the cost that why they came up with $30 million was because if the government does it by itself, there's a tremendous amount of regulations, it has to be prevailing wages, you have to go through the Weeks Law process, and so on. Whereas if you go into a public-private partnership, then at that point a lot of those requirements are bypassed.
Couldn't we do that with the technology though? Couldn't we do that with the pod clustered systems that would be less disruptive as far as digging up the street and everything else? Couldn't we do that same thing?
No, I think that to dig up the street there will be some inconvenience since we have to bite the bullet. You cannot install such sewer systems. In some areas, you need to have a little pumping station.
I thought that had been put to bed, and we really were looking at this point at the more modern small systems, for the various properties as they come online, just because of the capital cost and because they've just authorized a lot of these systems now over the last year.
That's what I'm saying.
You need it to be centralized. It needs to be centralized. You still need a central client. Before you came, we were discussing the various possibilities of which location. And one location right next to the post office would be a very, very good location to have the plant there.
And the reason that I'm not sure, Mark, I totally understood. Why don't we had talked at one point of doing the
various cluster systems.
Yeah. So what's the downside with that?
There's really no downside per se.
Right.
It's certainly something that could be studied once we, you could have.
Right.
But it's really they work better as a centralized plant when you do an entire. Those little systems, or if you're going to do a little condominium project, or if you're going to do, 30, 40 units, or if you do but residential. But here we're going to do both sides of Lake Agawam, the entire village business district. You're looking at larger flows.
The high water table impact those smaller systems?
I just think we're going to have a hard time
On
getting
top of it, yeah.
support for that kind of public works project.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think if most is, because I remember this debate, we had the two guys in, one guy was more of the
Right.
small system, one guy was the central system.
Right.
And what I remember was that most of these buildings have a septic behind them in whatever yard they've got.
Right.
And that you could, basically replace that system instead of digging towards the front and having to dig up streets and run pipes.
No, I think the system that they had come up with also comes from to the back, it goes to like a little pumping station that's underground, and from that pumping station you go to the central plant. So we would have various, the collection system would be from the back of the building. There would be minimum disruption on the street.
So we do it like from the central parking lot.
The central parking lot, the parking lot, the various parking lot, feed it into like a little pumping station.
We can dig up those old reports.
Yeah,
we had
maybe we
we had the
should.
two consultants who came
I
in.
think, I do it as a matter for debate and something we need to think about, and do we as a commission, and look, there's only 5 of us here, and there's 3 others who really should weigh in also, but are we as a commission ready to say to the village, you have to address the sewage? Like, are we ready to say,
I think
we think it's time, we think it's time that you have to address it, and then let's talk about the methods, but we cannot
Absolutely.
continue to, my editorializing, we cannot have our heads in the sand forever.
It's time.
I
This
think
has
they
to be
want-
addressed.
I think they want to. It's just
Right.
the fact. I was talking to a business owner just the other
Right.
day, and they were saying, a centralized service sounds great, but it's this person, who is an old business person here, says
Right.
it's a gamble. We have 20 restaurants in this village, and when they close, it's not because there's no food, it's because there's no people. The sewer doesn't bring people.
Yes, it does.
So if we have a cluster, do the clustered, like what Ellen was saying, I think that would put less, would be more.
Well, I don't think that that's the question on the table. I think what Paul is saying is that, regardless of what system is finally
Exactly.
viewed
I agree-
and
I
or
agree with- I agree
accepted,
with that. I agree with
that we as a commission are committed
I agree with that.
to saying that we need to address this. Is that what you were saying?
Right, I think there's a few things. Number one is, I know there's a lot of mythology out there that that if we do a sewer system, there's going to be a lot of density. And all I can say is we've now spent 2 or 3 years doing an enormous amount of zoning. Anyone who still thinks that this density is just, I can't, people who believe, they think, what can you do? But it's just not the case. So the other issue then is, which I think was very clear, as Ellen was bringing up, is tremendous amount of concern about the price and the burden it placed on the owners to try to sustain that. And so, so I think looking at alternative systems, looking at a bigger system, so you include not just the business owners, so other people are helping to share the burden. All of those are things that can maybe, and also I also think that when you start to deal with the other thing, the other properties that are impacting Lake Agawam, you both improve why it's being done, but also, as Mark says, you're going to open yourself up to much more public funding. Just they need to make the clear connection.
And that's the key. And that's the,
And what's frustrating to me is we started all this, we spent all the village money on it, and then the village of West Hampton Beach, the mayor who was literally sitting in the audience for all our meetings thought, this is a great idea. She got it done, and the county and the town basically paid for it. So it's like we're now sitting
And that would
here.
be a test case. to see-
Right.
to see- to
It's
see
a
if
great test
to see
case
if
that in
works.
fact, well,
To see if that works.
drive down Main Street in West Hampton Beach right now and tell me which one looks more accurate.
I'm not saying it. I'm just saying let's see if what they do works.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
but also a centralized system, has, you treat the waste
Right.
to another level.
Right.
See, those cluster systems are very good and they treat, maybe 20, 30 times better than the septic system. But the centralized system treats it at 300 times. It's like another, you really can treat it to potable water standard. It's like, you know, and also a larger system, a centralized system, is actually easier to fund and to
I would think so.
yes, rather than smaller systems. You know, I was recently at a conference, a P3 conference of private partnerships, and you know, it's anything that's less than 30, 40, 50 million dollars, they don't want to look at.
It's very hard because of the financing cost.
The financing cost of. So when you look at like a larger system, you know, there's absolutely ways to do it. And with the new infrastructure bill, see, there are states that do a lot of public-private partnerships. New York State is not one of them, but it's getting into that mode. So we would like be one of the, you know, in the leader.
That would be good.
Can I ask you a question, Joe? Do you think owners see more residential units in the village centers helping them?
I think that there is, from what I've heard, there is still apartments in the village. They're just rented. They are given to the employees.
You have to be grandfathered. You cannot develop.
No, and I'm
Ones that are
thinking
grandfathered.
the
They are
existing
grandfathered.
apartments that exist.
Right.
When we're not turning offices.
Right.
I understand. I could be wrong.
Right.
Don't quote me.
No, you're right.
It's not open. It's open to. It's only given to those who work in the.
Well, that's like, there's like 23 units right now, but I'm talking about if there were 200 units, I'm making it up, but just as an example, if there were 200 units in the village center, and so you had 400 to 500 people who lived in the village center, do people think that that would help their
I have
businesses?
I have a friend of mine who has an apartment above Main Street, and you think, I don't know what he pays, but it's a lot of money. And I'm not going to say how much, but it's a mortgage payment. So how is that going to, that's on the free market. So can the average, and he's in the business where he can afford it. Now, can the average person afford that much money? I'm not going to say how much it is.
Well, no, but let me make a different point. So, for example, there are, I can vouch, I'm in the middle of this now, so there are a very large number of older people here who have big houses, or houses, whether they're big or not, but they're very expensive to operate, and they're looking for options. And one of the issues the village has is the options are not great if you want to stay in the village. So if you gave those people who are economically fairly well off but don't want the burden of a house and created housing in the village center, and they could walk to a restaurant or they could walk to a store, do people see that as part of, because right now we can't do that. That's not, the health department will not allow it.
I don't know. I think that people who do have those nicer homes, if they move to Whitefield, or they move to what's going to be the latch. They want one floor living. Or
But those are to buy. I'm talking to rent.
I can't say.
And I think we have a problem, because I know the initial village center plan
Right.
with Stan all those years
Right.
ago was a great objective, was to create a year-round
Right.
village center, which is a great objective. I think we have an economic battle in that if you create housing, you may just create weekend housing or summer housing,
Right.
unless you put some other economic controls on it, which is
Right.
difficult for us to do.
Right.
So, I mean, if it's nice housing, which
Right.
it could easily be,
But,
Right.
you know,
how you're not going to necessarily guarantee that you have a resident there, and a lot of people who are even retirement age might only want to still be here in the summer and then be in another
Although,
state.
just speaking about the Southampton Arts Center for a minute, so the Southampton Arts Center actually has activities every Friday night.
Yes, I believe you. Yes.
And they're fairly crowded. And the population, the average age, I would say, is about 70. So even in the middle of the winter, like this, go tomorrow night, you'll see there's a large audience, and it's people in their 70s. And they live here year-round, but, you know, right now their options are terrible. There's condos that were built in the 70s. There's very expensive stuff like White Fields or the Village Latch. There's Bishop's Pond, which is way outside the village. If you want to have a reasonable apartment and just live here, you don't really have options here. And the question is, that was, I think, the vision in part.
Yeah, the question is, how do you achieve that? I
Right,
agree, it's
right,
great vision,
right.
but how do you
Right, good
actually
question.
achieve that?
How do you
'Cause,
stimulate a younger market, let's say?
well, you
Right.
affordable housing.
Right.
Well, not only that, but you need
Yeah.
stuff going on.
But that's also why it's so hard,
Right.
I know this office
Chicken and the
project
egg problem,
that's
right.
going on outside of town,
Yeah.
sure enough. But there, how many young workers or young
Right.
families
Right.
can afford to be in the village? Well,
Right.
they can't.
And we have this chicken and the egg problem, which is young families can afford to be here, therefore there's not a lot of activity. There's not a lot of activity because there's not a lot of young people. So, the question is where to break that. And one of the things that I find frustrating, honestly, is we keep going in the same circle, which is we're not going to do anything because we don't believe, we're not guaranteed about any of these. And I think at some point as a
But it's not
village,
just an economic thing with this.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about Lake Agawam.
Right, quality of
basically.
life.
We're talking about the water.
right,
We're talking about that
right,
on the mural.
right.
That goes away,
But-
and
but-
everything goes
But
away.
in fairness, as Joe's pointing out, for the business owner on Main Street who's going to have to help pay for it, they're going to say, is this giving me more business, right?
It will, of course it will.
There's no certainty of that.
But I think that
There's
there's,
no certainty of that.
I think
Yes,
we're having a lot of
it will.
discussions there should be separate discussions. One discussion is the implementation of the sewer system.
Right.
Another discussion that's really not somewhat independent is how do you finance it?
Right.
And how much grants? And at that point, we would set up a team of grant writers and see how we would fund this the project. And then another team should then look at all of the other areas that we're going to need to look at, like parking, like traffic flows, and things that with the development that will follow the sewer.
I agree
So
with you,
these are
there's no
separate
certainty, but honestly,
discussions.
if you look at the towns, if you look at the villages that have done this, the record is pretty substantial. Patchogue, tremendous impact. Sag Harbor, tremendous impact. I mean, I can go on and
And
on.
whenever that's brought up, people say, okay, we're not Sag Harbor, we're not Patchogue.
But Sag Harbor was not Patchogue. One of the, there's no doubt in Sag Harbor, one of the reasons it's the only town out here that has significant activity in the winter.
But it's also maintained its population for decades.
Right, but what I'm saying is they've actually done things. So the part of the problem in Southampton is we don't do anything, and then we say, oh my God, we have no winter population. And at some point, you have to decide, okay, am I just going to live with that and say it is what it is? Or you have to do things, and you can't succeed doing nothing. I think my feeling is that sewer came up 3 years ago. It's very easy to point to pick holes and say all the things they reasoned out, and everyone's feeling was, you know what, we'll get by. And 3 years later, we see a lake getting worse and worse, a village center getting worse and worse, and we can either let it continue to happen.
I'm not saying do nothing. I'm just saying let's give people options.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. And so the question is, how do we do that? How do we come up with options that begin to
Well, really,
let
is it
people
up to
decide?
us?
Because
Is it up to us? Is it up to us?
No, well, it's up to us to maybe create options. It's not up to decide. But it could be up to us to help create options, right?
Yes. I think that the first step would be to identify some sites possible for acquisitions for the center. Which sites? I thought that the site by the
That's the second step. The first step is what system you're going to use. The
Yeah.
first
no,
step
no,
is
no, not really, because once you have the central site, then you can
But maybe the
decide
first- can I-
which technology you want to
Maybe
use.
the first
Even
question.
if we use those cluster systems, we could use those cluster systems that then feed to a central system. You see what I'm saying? It's not, to go all that.
I'm not convinced. I don't think a central system is probably that practical. So
Sorry, what?
I don't know if that's practical because we went down that road.
No,
But
well-
at any rate, the first step is to reevaluate the proposals and see what the current technology and costs are, what options are available.
I think what costs are available is going to be critical to what Joe's saying.
And I think the other question, which I think is sort of what Joe's raising, is just maybe one of the first things is what are you trying to accomplish?
Right.
Right? So, what are we trying to do?
What's the
So,
mission?
one of the things that became intriguing to me last fall was homeowners on the lake starting to say, we really wanted to be left alone. And we don't feel that way anymore because we see what's happening. So we understand now, as we didn't several years ago, we have to do something. And so if you begin to look at, in a way, if you expand it outside of the business district, it may be easier. It's then it's a
Might be
different
an
sort of
easier
set of
sell.
issues, right? Because
Yeah,
you're
but the only snag with that is that there's a lot of flag lot on First Neck and South Main. There's
Yeah.
a lot of flag lots.
So-
and to run a pipe down the driveway, that's going to be,
Sorry, to what?
Well, they're not there in January, February, March.
no.
Run it
You
down.
can run. I mean, running the heights is not a big deal.
Go ahead and run it
When you
down.
go
It's a lot.
underneath
It's a lot. I
that-
mean, it's a lot because it's disruptive to people.
Right,
How
right.
are you going to get all these people to want, I mean, that's
that's
know you
It
Take
is
that
good.
off.
I mean, progress is disruptive. I mean,
it's not necessarily progress. The point is that there's already technology in place. And already this town's requiring people to put elevated
and actually there.
sewage treatment systems in. So
To open
It's a-
point,
and the benefit is
there's one going in.
30% as opposed to 300%.
There's one going in next door. There's,
Right.
So
right, right.
it's
Right.
happening.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's
that
happening.
it is happening. We should reopen those studies. We had
Right,
some of that
yeah.
work done.
Yeah.
And look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that, but, okay.
And the board has
Because what is the goal? There's a couple of goals we're talking about. One is helping the lake, cleanliness of the lake, and the other is this village center and making possibly more opportunities for restaurants and residential, both of which are
Vitality.
difficult to do right now under the current permit
But also
situation.
the third one is health, simply health issue.
Well, that's
That the
health is
septic
related to the
systems
lake,
are-
Pure
right?
and
Clean
simple,
water.
you're right.
Yeah, that
It
they
is
don't
a health
have it.
issue.
It's a health
Absolutely.
issue. They pump it out. I mean, it's not perking.
It's not just the water in Agawam that will eat your skin off. It's the air flowing off of it that gets into your nose and into your lungs. And it's real. It's not fake.
Yeah, no, that's one of the,
People who were here when the bloom happened, it was pretty intense. And it's going to get worse. I mean, the problem we have in Lake Agawam is, the village has actually put a significant amount of resources. But there's only so much you can do with the sort of things we've been doing, and it has had some impact, but you can't ultimately solve it.
Without the will.
But
it's not that simple. I mean, every single one of these lakes up and down
Right,
Long Island,
yeah.
up and down the East Coast have
Right.
similar issues.
Right.
So what are you going to spend 40
Some
million
towns
cleaning
are
this lake?
addressing them, like West Hampton Beach. Some
Right.
towns are addressing them.
It's this whole list. It's many things.
I know.
It's not just the sewage system.
right.
I understand,
Also for the-
because this is an accumulation of not having one.
Well, among other things.
But I think also, I'm not 100% sure, but
Right.
I think that in terms of bonding capacity, I think that the village has just repaid recently some of its bonds, and it's perfect timing
Right.
to start a major capital project.
I just don't think that taxpayers probably want to have a bond issue for multi-million dollars for a centralized sewer system.
They had a bond issue for the ambulance barn.
$5 million?
So, but that's a
That's been
bigger
the issue.
question.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
But
That-
we should
that is the hard
present
question.
this to technological, I mean, we
Right.
should, your point is what are the objectives,
Right.
A, and B, what are the best technologies to
And I
meet the
also want to
objectives?
begin to raise, what happens if you don't do anything? Because I believe the village center is eventually going to basically die, except in the summer, unless we do something. It's just, the trend is not, I don't know how you reverse the trend without doing something very significant this time. And, it's like, so if you took the movie theater site and said, how do we redo that so it became a major asset? Again, one of the problems is in the current circumstance, the health department has very strict limits on what you can do there. So I just get increasingly concerned about where the village is going to be 10, 20 years from now if we don't start to address these issues. Particularly when other villages are. I think, the thing that's upsetting to me, I'm incredibly upset about West Hampton Beach because they literally did what we didn't do. And all the money that the study said you could raise outside, it turned out you could raise outside. All the things I heard from the audience of like that was not true and the burden would all be on the village, turned out not to be the case. And so West Hampton Beach now is building a plant largely paid for by the county, the town, the state, and the federal government. And they're going to have a clean water and the ability of that village to open new restaurants and residential in the village center. And West Hampton Beach is actually a competitor to ours. Like, if you can find that environment, you'll go there, just like people go to Sag Harbor. So I just think we need to deal with it, and whether, I agree with you, whether it's best to do it through small things that don't require a major bonding initiative, whether it's best to do it by allowing people to do it in some for private way and giving them tax credits. I don't know what it is, but I'm just concerned that at this point,
Yeah, I mean,
we're falling further behind.
I think we can study both, but we will find that the centralized larger systems will actually end up costing the taxpayers far less.
Far less. And
Because
that's what I really
it's a lot easier to finance, it's a lot easier, it makes a larger impact on the environment, you're able to get more grants because you're making a larger
Yeah, they want to
impact.
do something
The
big.
problem is it's all at once. I think the difference, and what makes this politically so difficult, is so when you do a centralized plan, you say to the, which what is exactly right, and we found it last time. You say to the taxpayer, okay, we want to borrow $30 million. Now, the village has a net property value in excess of $1 billion. In a logical world, so what? But that's not the political world. In the political world, you say $30 million, people get very concerned, right? And they think it's going to change their life. So, well, but people are not necessarily going to feel that way. So what the difficulty of this, I think, is you're right. In the long run, it's much cheaper. But people don't think in the long run. They think, okay, what is it for me in the next 5 years? And so if the other option, which will cost more without a doubt, is you say, look, everybody in the village is going to have to comply. We'll give you 10 years to comply, and you do your own system.
It costs more.
It will cost more, but it will give them time, and they can choose what they want.
But it also gives them more control of the property owner.
Correct.
So if you want to buy a piece of property and put
Right.
apartments above, you as part of the construction of that building, you would install your own system in the back.
No,
So
but they don't. see,
you
like,
can control the
see,
timing.
That the regulations right now, and I don't think we're going to change the regulations in Suffolk County, as we explained before, is that you see the amount of wastewater flow that you get depends on the size of the property. And then, so if you want that, for example, on Job's Lane, the projects that are coming up, they are not putting any residential above.
Right.
Not because they don't want to, because they cannot get approvals for it.
Right.
So all the flow is being taken from for the commercial space. And it's very small flow because the properties are very small. But if you do a centralized plant, then you remove that.
Well, we had that
limit.
person from Massachusetts, remember, who told us that you could combine 4 or 5 or 10 properties
Yeah.
and put
No,
those
that's
into
correct.
one.
But the question
section.
then becomes, so let's go through the two parts. Because you're raising, these are all the right issues. So let's take a house on Lake Agawam. Yes, you could say to them, you have to you have to improve your septic. We'll give you 10 years, but you got to do it. And that person can do it, right? They have a 20,000 square foot lot. They'll figure out a place to put it. So now let's go to the 2,500 square foot lot on Job's Lane. So that person has to get his 10 neighbors to agree, do it at the same time, all help pay for it. That's what's difficult. So I think the hard part is actually in the village center. There's virtually, maybe with the exception of Hildreth, I don't know, there's very, very few properties that would be large enough they could individually do it, so they would have to cluster. And then how do you create that cluster? Like,
And
how does
it's
that happen?
unfinanceable. It's not financeable.
Right, you can't finance it, so you have to pay for it yourself. You can't.
That's the thing, you
Nobody's
have to
gonna-
get the money for the big project.
Exactly. You
So
can only
that's
get
where it's getting difficult. I agree with you, and I thought his idea was a great idea, but then I've been thinking, like, how do we, I don't know, maybe there is a way, but the question is, how do you get that to happen? And that they would have to pay 100% of. There's no public funding for that.
Exactly.
There's no funding for that.
So let's say a system costs how much, a cluster system?
A few $100,000.
Like $300,000, say, and you get 10 owners together, so it's only $30,000. But it's $30,000, right? And how do you get 10 people to agree? And one of them lives in New York and blows you off. It's like, that's, I think, the hard part of this is,
And then if you do this, you have to create mini sewer districts. It's like the complexity.
maybe to Eldon's point, maybe, again, the idea is lay out the options
Yes.
so that people can think about it. Because part of, I think, what happened last time is there were no options. It was like, this is the answer.
We're also sort of speaking with a lot of half-facts. We don't
Right,
really know
right,
exactly what all the facts are until you can
Right.
re-engage with the different
Right.
professionals and
Does,
lay it out.
Yeah.
does West Hampton Beach have a centralized system?
Yes. Well, they don't, they're doing it.
Well, they're doing it.
Yeah.
And Sag Harbor has a centralized
Absolutely.
system?
Sag Harbor had the first one out here.
Yeah, I know, and it's kind of
That's the
old. I know
old-fashioned
that.
one, you know, from the
Yeah.
But the technology, it's even the hospital has technology that, I used to learn when I went to school. It's like 40 years ago. So, but they still have a centralized plant. The hospital should change the technology, but it's still within the plant.
Yeah.
But I think in the other, and obviously no one's against clean
Right,
water
right,
and
right.
all that. The other major thing, which is broader than just sewage, is the strength of the village business district over time.
Right.
And sewage may be a piece of that, but it's certainly
Right.
not the only
No.
issue by any means. So, and I think we've talked a little bit about addressing that. I think there's a lot of public concern now
Right,
because of
yeah.
stores closing.
Right.
So I think that, I don't know when or how, but we might want to bring that up as a whole topic in and of itself.
Part of the mission of this, I would say, would be
Right.
to point to the
Right, just talk about the ways.
vitality of the road.
Yeah, how do we?
Because it is a concern.
And part of it is what activities can you do in the October through June months that,
They've been talking about.
and attract locals, right? I mean, the problem is you really need,
And
Joe was saying before, and I thought it was a very good sort of point. In March, how do you get someone from North Sea to want to come into the village, right? That's the question. It's not like you try to get someone from New York to come into the village. It's like,
No.
how do you get the local
yeah,
to say there's things here they want to do?
And lower the average age limit of people attending whatever
Right, right,
variety there is.
right. Because there are school kids out here, so there are parents, right? It's difficult. I think it's very difficult.
Well-
And you're also, look, everybody in this world you're fighting against the general retail trends, and, it's just a harder
Well,
environment. than it was.
planning, I know you mentioned that people don't think of planning except for, 5 years from now. But, that really isn't our mission,
Right, right.
is it?
No, our mission is to think longer.
Our mission is longer.
Right. So, I'd like everyone to think about, I think, Ellen's right, who should we engage? How would we go about having a sort of coherent conversation, which I think starts, again, with what are we trying to accomplish? And then what are the options? And let the public weigh in, and then, what our job is really to present options to the trustees, not decide for them, obviously.
Well, money's going to be the big thing, and the bigger, the more money you're going to get.
Well, just talking about Eldon's half-truths, I mean,
No,
one
no,
thing
I
that would be
understand.
helpful would be maybe have someone come in from West Hampton and talk about how it got funded, right? I mean, that's going to be a
Well,
real-life
and how
current
did they
example
arrive at that solution?
from us.
Well,
But no,
I know,
I
but
agree
I
with
mean,
you. I
as
agree with you,
opposed to
yes.
the small little
Right,
cluster things. I
right,
mean, why did they arrive at that one?
Because there was no options at that point.
Yeah, they started, but I mean,
There are options, but
No, I'm saying when they started, there was no, when you guys
Correct.
started, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so that was just a one-way street then.
I think so. I mean, I think they really took the initiative, and that's correct. When they were doing their plan, the county had not licensed all the other
How long
possibilities.
is it taking them to put this together?
5 years?
That's what we talked about. When we were first talking about it, we were talking 5 years.
I think it's been 5
yes,
years.
about 5 years.
Were we talking about 5 years too?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years.
It would take about 5 years if we were to, from
Right.
design to...
To completion.
But I think to go back again to that same point, I think where you put the plant is a critical factor.
Right, but that is in effect somewhat impacted by what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, but I think that if we're able to acquire a site and we say this is where the plant is going to be, then at that point the next step would be to get the engineering firm that would then design the system and they know where it goes. We have a site.
Well, we already did that. I mean, they identified a site up by the police station.
Yeah, but the site of the police station was a very small site. So what happened is that there are limits for setback requirement. And we sort of boxed ourselves into that up limit to be able to have setbacks that are, very small. So that's why we limited the areas that we could serve.
Yeah, that you could
Whereas
serve.
if we move that plant to next to the post office, at that point you know, then wider setbacks, but then you don't have that limit for the flow, and then you could then address the houses on each side.
This village attorney's empty lot, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, he'll finally sell that lot. Oh my, he's just.
Or just eminent domain.
Well, it's a large lot. But I guess, so let's,
It
I
has,
mean,
it
I
has
think,
great, it's great surrounding.
but I think the issue is first, what do we want to accomplish? Are those goals that people can agree with? And then what are the options? And what are the costs of those options? And what
I
are
think
the,
that's a good way to go.
right?
Yeah.
And part of the concern I have is, so the CPF, you know, as we all know, now can fund clean water. And, you know,
Actually, I believe I heard that the CPF actually, we got grant money to do drainage on
Yep.
Jobs and
correct,
anyhow, so they have actually
right, for the
been
first
giving
time,
us some money, and
Yeah.
I think that
which is
hopefully,
great.
yes, I think hopefully they will be giving us more money
Right.
for other things in the future.
Right.
So it's happening.
Right, and as the supply of land goes down, more and more their
Yes.
money is going to go that way. So the question is, how do we, I think one of the questions for us is, how do we tap in? They were the final and very major funder of the West Hampton Beach sewer system.
But another property that is in
7
the,
mil, right? I think it was 7 mil.
I'm not sure, but I know they gave them money for drainage, but I
Yeah.
don't know what exactly.
Who are we talking
The
about?
CCPF
For
fund.
the water
the
quality,
CPF,
but yeah.
yeah.
there's also the property that the village owns on North Main Street across from McDonald's.
Right, right.
Could also be
That was already, I think that's for farming open space.
Yeah.
but even though the treatment system, the treatment plant could be underground,
Right.
you could still have the park on top. So that's also a great site.
That's cool.
It's a little further, but it's a very good site.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we should think about that and how we.
Well, just, you know, bullet points.
Right. Just, we should probably mention the hospital RFP. Do you want to talk a little bit about our meeting and? what
Yeah, we had,
happened?
I don't know if everyone, you weren't here at that meeting?
Joe was there, right?
Joe was there. We had a great presentation by 3 of the consultants. I actually don't have my notes with me, but it was AECOM was the first group. The
VHC.
VHC was one group, and then it was James Lima and FX Powell was the third group. We have the scoring card. I mean, I've actually filled it out, but I should distribute it just to make sure everyone gets the scoring in.
They were the, I think, Jameson was the preferred, I think, firm to use.
There was a lot of support for them, but I think we should make sure that the members who weren't there. So I can, as I told you I would do that, I'll make sure I get both of you the summary notes on the presentations. It was taped as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to look at the tapes, you're obviously welcome to look at the tape.
Yeah,
And then I think we should pretty rapidly get the scoring in so we can.
yeah, and make a recommendation to the trustees. So that was a good meeting. I thought the hospital representative was really helpful in terms of focusing the scope. But it did a very excellent job of, focusing on what we're really looking at. Our job is to really look at zoning, not to be the experts on whether the third floor has a load of 500 feet, it can do stuff, but really what our job is, and that was great. I thought it was a really good, all 3 firms were good. I mean, it was everybody, there's a lot of talent there. As someone said at the meeting, we should always have options like this.
Yeah. No, it was really all 3 very professional groups.
Yeah.
Eduardo was there, so he can.
Yes, Eduardo was there also. Yeah.
Great.
So I'm happy to circulate that, and maybe we could circle up,
Right.
pretty quickly. We should probably.
Yeah, and then you should look at it, and if you think it sounds right, tell us so that we can, because I think we need a majority of the planning commission to look at it and say, yes, this makes sense. To forward it to the
To one of
trustees.
them or to all?
To one of them. We're going to make a
To one
recommendation.
of them.
Yeah,
So we have by 3 finalists.
I believe, no, I could be
We're gonna
yeah.
suggest, we're gonna show all three on the scoring.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure everyone thinks the scoring
Right,
makes
I
sense.
think the trustees want 2 options just for, I think they want.
Well, they have 3 options.
I think that
There's
there
gonna be 3
probably should be
options,
a
and this is
panel
the scoring.
discussion about which one you want to go with, right?
Well, so there's 3 options. We've, Eldon's done some scoring. I want you to actually look, I guess one way to put it is look at the scoring and see if that makes sense. And then the trustees will
okay.
decide to do with the scoring whatever they want, but it will give us.
Oh, I see. So they're going to
Right.
work off of the scoring,
Right.
not off about any kind of recommendation that we make.
I think we're going to say these are the 3 firms and this is our scoring and let them decide.
And we pick this one, and we hope you agree. Is that what you're
But
saying?
it's up to them. I mean, we'll say this is the highest score, but
So then we
you
are
don't
gonna
always,
pick
by the way,
Okay.
you don't always pick the highest score.
No,
Like,
I
right?
got you. I got you.
Right? There
Well,
may be other reasons.
were the trustees there?
One trustee
He
was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kimberly?
Kimberly
I
was
think
there.
that they'll
So
probably be
Michael
able to look
wasn't
at.
there.
Michael was the first time.
Nancy
They'll be able
wasn't
to-
there.
We can also forward the video.
Right,
for any
right.
of them who want to watch.
And,
Only 2 can be there at once anyway.
and I think,
I'm sorry?
Only 2 can be there at once anyway.
yeah, I think Michael was at the first meeting.
Yes.
he was.
Yeah. We had 2 meetings. We had an initial meeting
No, yeah,
to review the
there,
7,
yeah.
right? And then the second was the 3, so. And the tape, I think, is on the village website, but if not, we'll make sure it is. So you can look at the tape.
You're going to forward the scoring to
I'll-
Kimberly Allen, the attendee?
Yeah.
Once we've all looked at it.
Well, we all have a scoring card, so.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Our next meeting, I believe, is March 7th.
Probably.